Hello, it's Sandra Ireland here. This year I've been very fortunate to be working with Tayside Healthcare Arts Trust, and we've formed a wonderful community of writers which we've entitled Tayonline, and on this page I'm going to post some of their work. I hope you'll enjoy.
It's a blustering, blistering wind that howls through those lonely glens, banging with anger at the wee bothy door, trying to come in, desperate to break down these cold stone walls. The whistling of the old iron gate, rattling itself to let free all the cows who have gone mad in fear, their wild cries terrifying all other creatures, thundering together aimlessly in their stricken panic. The burning smell of smoke drifts through the stolen night over the burn, sneaking in through the crack of the ill-fitted door. Outside in the yard there is a crow with a broken wing that spreads out by its side like a fan as large frozen stars begin to cover that crow as it fights to survive. A faceless present begins to take up the small room. The dog gets up and staggers with caution to the door, sniffs the air, then cowers backwards to return to its owner, where it lays back down again, covering its owner like a blanket, giving the last bit of its warmth.
So, on with Fenella. Fenella hadn't slept much in the last few days as she tried to decide about Durham's offer and her painting. The longing won, and she accepted the invitation, not realising that they expected her to be at the opening of said exhibition and to do a Q&A session with members of local art societies, etc. Too late to change her mind. Hope the questions didn't delve too deeply. The session was the day after the opening in a large side room. She nervously awaited her turn. Deep breath, off we go. Straightforward to begin with, why she chose that particular view, etc. Then a gentleman showed an interest in the colours she chose and how to mix them. Suddenly she was wary, especially when he went on to brush strokes and form. She tried to play it down and cut him short, but he wouldn't leave it alone and came back after the session. His explanation was that her style was similar to his, and could he bring some of his paintings to show me? Why? What was his motive? Should she go with it or cut him off? Her vanity was now causing problems.
The shore. As you walk along the shore, with the wind propelling you from behind, your sadness matches the brooding slate-grey sky as you dwell on the thoughts that are on your mind. The sea seems troubled as it ebbs and flows, reflecting the turmoil you carry today. Not even the beauty of the waves in their rhythm can chase or ease your heartache away. Regrets are futile. There is no going back. Harsh words have been spoken, causing much pain, and so deep they have cut to the quick. Can you hope for forgiveness once again?
Anne, having enjoyed her walk on the roof, she was spying lots of different rooftops, some rigid, some flat. She could see as far as the beachfront. I could get there over the rooftops without my friends, and I could enjoy the seashore without them. They would be left thinking, had I fallen, and they would be looking everywhere for me, while I was enjoying the wild waves and looking in the rock pools.
Stone Cottage. At last I reached the valley where I was to stay the night in an old stone cottage, which was situated on a lower valley slope, laying beneath the high mountain peaks that towered from behind. It was nearly dark, and the rain was getting heavier now. My anorak was sticking to my inner clothes, hot and wet on the inside, and cold and wet on the outside. So glad that there was a shelter from the cold winds that were gusting powerfully now alongside the lashing rain. I looked back, could still not see my fellow hiker. Separated from the exhaustion of the day's hike and weather, I stopped at the solid wooden door of the cottage, which needed a large shove to help it open. There was no lock, just a large bolt. Maybe it had been used for sheltering animals in the past, I thought. On entering, it felt and smelt really damp and dark. Looking for my torch, I switched it on, and something quickly scurried away into the corner. I jumped in surprise, and feeling a bit apprehensive now, I followed the sound to see, tentatively, 2 black beady eyes of a mouse, looking up at me like a statue, standing motionless in the corner. And as we exchanged glances, it suddenly shot like a bolt of lightning through a tiny hole in the base of the wall. I sighed with relief and felt more at ease now. And then, as I settled down again, I began to feel compassion for the tiny mouse, who was probably more frightened of me, and maybe just wanted to come in out of the rain to be dry too. The wind whistled around the cottage and the rain raced down the window panes. I thought, I'm glad I'm not on my own tonight. My hiker friend Norma was coming hopefully about an hour later, as she had a longer hike to get more supplies for tomorrow. We were preparing to ascend the higher slopes of the mountain peak behind the cottage together tomorrow, depending on the weather conditions. Using my torch beam, I spotted a small fireplace, and thankfully a small bundle of dry kindling and a stack of logs, a thoughtful gesture from the last hiker's stay, and so gladly decided to light a fire. I had brought some firelighters from my survival kit, which helped me to quicken the flames as they started to alight. Taking off my wet clothes, I felt the slight warmth already from the fire as I stretched out my cold hands. I was just glad to put on a dry extra jumper too, and to rest a while as I poured out some bottled water to heat up for a hot drink. Thankfully, there was an old kettle on a wooden table and a bench-like seat around the sides of the wall. A piece of string hung across the corner from 2 hooks, and I hung my wet clothes to dry. And I had a small gas stove in my backpack, so was able to make a hot drink. At last the kettle's whistle blew from the stove. The hot water was ready. It felt so good, even though I added dried milk. It was hot and my hands clasped round the metal cup, which warmed my hands too. I had some music on my phone to cheer me up, and then realised I would need to save the battery life, as there was no electric to recharge the phone. I wondered what the time was, as it was getting darker now outside, nearing dusk, and I still had no sign of my friend who was meeting me here. I glanced at my watch in the dim flickering light. Already it was 7 p.m. A little concerned, I tried to phone, but there was no signal. I looked out from the window. It was pitch black, could only see my reflection, so I peeked outside the doorway, and a quick glance could not see any figure in the dark. The thrust of the wind pulled it back tight with a slam. I suddenly felt at that moment a sense of isolation and loneliness and apprehension, knowing I was cut off from connecting with her, and felt a bit anxious now, not knowing if she was okay or had lost her way. Already feeling hungry, and to take my mind off worrying, I found in my supplies a self-contained stew-based mix, which I managed to heat up ready to eat for when hopefully my friend arrived. No one came, and I was quite hungry now and decided to have my stew and leave some for my friend. I unpacked my rucksack and was pleased to see the sleeping bag was dry. I needed to unroll the mat that needed to dry out a bit, just at the edges really, as it had been rolled up into a bag on my back. I decided it would be best to sleep along the bench seat off the floor in case there was any unwelcome crawling creatures there. I found a candle on the table centre to give light as the fire began to smoulder. As it shone, it brought out a beautiful wood grain too. It felt quite atmospheric and calming. I noticed there was a narrow inner door at the end of the room, and, on exploring, found it was like an outhouse with a toilet there. I was relieved I would not need to go outside in the cold during the night. I made myself cosy in my sleeping bag as the damp cold air began to dry out and must have dozed off. I awoke with an alarm to the sound of a shrill whistle, the thud of a heavy door flying open, a sound of barking, and a figure standing in the doorway. Startled at the sound, I tried to call out, "Who's there?" But my voice came out like a whisper, and my body had frozen at the suddenness of being woken up. Then, as I accustomed to the light of the flickering flame, I realised the wet-drenched figure was my friend, and her dog had guided her here. I was so thrilled and relieved to see her, and that she was okay. She said her dog had run after a rabbit, and she had a difficult time bringing her back, and then realised she had lost time and was way off course, in the wind and the rain and as darkness fell. "So glad to see you, Norma," I said. "I thought I would never find this place, Joan, but thanks to Shep here," and she gave her dog an affectionate hug. "She could smell your scent, Joan." "Clever dog," I said. "Well done, Shep, too." Shep loved this attention and rolled over to receive more. He smelt of a wet, damp doggy smell as Norma used an old rag to dry up his coat and paws. "Come by the fire," I said, "and take off that wet anorak and get dry. There is some stew for you and enough for Shep too. Just need to heat it a little. And there's a log for the fire. There should be enough water in the kettle if you heat it on the stone." Soon the little stone cottage seemed a much better place to be in. I felt a lot happier with my friend's company as we shared about our day's hike, just relaxing by the fire, chattering, laughing and singing too. I think we would have scared any would-be wild animals, if there be some, with the noise we made. Soon we both became tired and snug in our sleeping bags, watched the embers of the fire go down till it went out. The flickering candle was blown out. "Time to sleep," I said. "It's a big day tomorrow. We will need to be up at dawn to get our breakfast and set off for the climb. Hopefully the storm will have passed and we shall have a better day." "Good night. God bless," I said. But there was no reply, only the sound of gentle snoring, and Shep sprawled out by the embers of the fire on an old blanket.
You're so pleased to see me, prowling around like a cat. You sit unsettled. Cup of tea? I'll open the door. It's lovely outside. The latch catches, gentle pressure on the lever, quickens as impatience increases. The door is abandoned. Curling up viciously on the sofa, legs underneath, balefully glaring at the handle, suddenly. Cup of tea? Bouncing to your feet, moving your hair with a push of your arm, you stride to the kitchen, turn and pounce again at the door, vigorously pressing downwards. Nothing happens. You let go and turn, only to attack once more. Up, click, down, click, up, click, down, click. Cursing, you spit and move away. Shrugging, you push your hair back. It would have been nice in the garden. You smooth your tawny hair with an elegant hand and ignoring the door, as if it were never there or ever seen, and you slink to the kitchen. Cup of tea?
From dump to penthouse, Stig goes up in the world. His last few worldly possessions packed into the cardboard box, Stig slapped his cap on head and with smiles spread across his face, jumped into the new Land Rover and set off in the April morning sunshine. Life at the dump had been fun at times as he grew up, but mostly tough. He'd met some great people, made great friends, in fact, but at 27 years of age, he was more than ready to move on. Home was now to be a luxury penthouse suite complete with rooftop garden, to still be in contact with the outside world, lest he felt at odds with his new place. He could sit out at night and muse at the stars, even sleep out there. He had choices now. Luck and life changed that quiet Sunday afternoon as Stig mooched around a newly abandoned pile of car tyres. He thought he spied a pink and white paper piece, shiny new in a rippling puddle. Out of habit, his eyes were unconsciously trained to take in whatever lay about, often couldn't believe what folk cast aside and threw away. More out of curiosity than anything, Stig picked it up and flapped the puddle water off the paper. A lottery ticket. His eyes flicked to the top right-hand corner and looked at the date. Friday just gone, 2 days ago, worth checking out in case he'd won £10. Sure enough, next day at Mr. Singh's newsagent along the road, celebrations started. Mr. Singh took down a box of unopened Meltis Newberry fruits, for this really was an occasion. The lottery machine told them Stig was the winner of £1.7 million. Stig couldn't take it in at first, dodging local and national and paparazzi. Everyone wanted a piece of his rags to riches story. At the dump, 3 months went by before he started looking in estate agent windows, and homes dazzled his brain. How could anyone need 8 bathrooms in a 6-bedroom house? And one with a special room for refuse even? Mind-blowing. Didn't folk just throw things in the outside bin or donate them to the tip, ready for him to claim as his own? All this he reported to Mr. Singh on each visit to the shop. Stig's confusion and bewilderment was obvious to Miranda, the kind young assistant at Kempson Smith, the local estate agent. It was she who persuaded him to look at a few properties nearby, and eventually the smart warehouse conversion, where he felt strangely drawn to the penthouse and the idea of looking up at the stars as he had done on going to bed all his life at the dump. Today he had the keys to his new home and his new life unfurled before him. He had choices and opportunities, and it felt indescribably good.